Hello guys and welcome back to Daddy Share Space. So today I decided to fire up my battery powered table saws and I'm just doing a little unofficial comparison between them all. I This is my first time actually putting this Festool table saw through its paces, so I'm using 2x lumber. And as I was mentioning before in a previous video, I want to build some stands for my Capex saws until I get the UG stands. So I'm taking off the edges on these 2x4s and I'm just basically milling down as many of them as I can so that I'll have boards to work with for that project. Now, as you can see, I don't have dust extraction hooked up, and that was because I actually had it overhanging the garage door as a faux boom. At this point, I'm realizing that, it might be a good idea to get a longer dust extraction hose if I'm going to only have one dust extractor in the shop. Regardless, I decided to go ahead and press forward. I got my dust mask on and my safety glasses, so I'm just going to press forward just like this. Now, one thing I would note about using this Festool saw, I have to be honest, for the size, it's surprisingly powerful by comparison. And you wouldn't think that it actually has the power that it has for such a compact saw, but it's actually going through this 2x4 Douglas fir pine board with little to no trouble. Now, that's not to say that it didn't have any hangups. I actually used, I want to say, well, the batteries that I started off with, I had made cuts with this saw before, but not a lot. And I didn't really check the battery life. So I can't say that these were fully charged batteries. I just basically pulled the saw out and I just started cutting. I do feel like I got quite a few cuts in this session. However, I was able to stall the saw maybe a couple times. Well, one time I actually stalled the saw, but the other times is when the battery actually needed to be changed. It actually died out on me. And then also the third time, basically, the saw actually overheated. I don't know if that was the batteries or if it was the saw, but basically the display registered that it had overheated. But in between those three, I guess, hang-ups, the saw did surprisingly well. Now, I'm not gonna, this is as a kit, this is a $2,000 saw. I don't think that I would be, cutting things like this on a regular on this particular saw, especially since I have other options. I just wanted to see what this saw could do because it was the most accessible. If you can look at my setup right now, this particular saw is set up to where I have the most, basically, this saw is set up to where I have the most runway prior to the saw, so it's a lot easier to cut. And I also have decent space after the saw. However, I don't have as much support as I do with my Milwaukee saw. So it looks like here, this is one of the times where it kind of stalled. You just have to hit that green button, hold it in or whatever, turn it back on, and then the saw just fired back up for me. And I just kept on with the work. So I'm thinking that maybe I just pushed the saw just a little bit too hard on that occasion. I don't really consider when the battery actually goes down to be actually a stall. So maybe it stalled twice, I don't know. Can't remember exactly. I had to trim out a lot of this video because it was kind of monotonous, basically, switching. But even though I have multiple angles here to try to add a little bit of interest, I realized that in doing this video, I have to get a little bit better at moving my cameras around a little bit more, taking the time, which adds time to these shop projects, which also slows down the process of actually growing in your woodworking because you're doing more than one thing. You're being a video editor, you're being a you're trying to learn how to do woodworking, but then you're thinking about cinematography and how this is going to go together. And then right now I'm doing a voiceover, which is also added time. I think the footage for this particular video in its entirety, it was probably over about an hour or so, and that's not including any kind of setup time. That's just straight cutting time. So I'm just kind of letting you get a good look at how things fared with this Festool CSC Sys 50 table saw. And then once I get finished kind of using this saw, I'm going to move over and utilize the Milwaukee saw, so you can kind of get a little bit of a look at that for your own visual comparison. And then finally I'll round up with a few cuts on my DeWalt saw, so you can kind of see what that is like for you. Now, I don't really have my shop set up ideally for me to really do a decent head-to-head. I'm thinking I want to do that in the future. So you can see there all three saws lined up, and the one that I have the least in feed to is the actual Milwaukee at this time. So of course I want to get better at being able to mill up my lumber. This is going to be one of the steps. I actually learned this from one of the guys on YouTube, where I've seen people actually cut off the edges on their 2x4s before, just to make it have a more clean and uniform look. However, cutting the board down enough to where you can actually split it in half was something that was a bit new to me, because I guess you're losing a lot of material when you do that. However, if you don't have a bandsaw with the capacity to be able to split a board in half, then these are the options and sacrifices that you have to make. So it looks like here the saw may have powered off again. So I must have stalled it here, because it looks like I just fired it back up and it kept going. Now I actually did, now there's a chance that that could have been the battery change time or something like that, because I did cut out the portion of this video where I just walked over to grab batteries to change. But I'm just kind of telling you that I did have to change the batteries once. The second set of batteries did not die. However, I got the overheating, the saw was overheating notification. And so I decided to just go ahead and wrap it up there. I wasn't willing to go ahead and just destroy the saw in one session. So that's when I moved on to the Milwaukee saw. But as you can see there to the top of the screen, all of those boards were cut going lengthwise with this saw, just trimmed off one edge. I got around to starting to trim off the second side on a few boards, not many, but all of the boards that are over there on the left in their full length were actually trimmed at least on one side with this Festool CSC Sys 50 table saw. And you can see it's making the cuts with relative ease. I mean, you can't, just jam the board in there, but for its size, as I said, it packs quite a punch. And as you can see here, I decided to go ahead and hook up the dust extraction. It was working pretty well at first, but I think somehow maybe it got disconnected from the vacuum, or maybe the vacuum got clogged. It's a possibility as well, because I am using a 27 millimeter hose. I looked over and I saw that there was I didn't see the Cyclone moving. So here I've moved on to the Milwaukee, and as you can see, I've got a better situation as far as outfeed, using it in conjunction with my MFT. That's why I built the little cabinet to put this saw in. Originally, I had some crazy idea of building a huge MFT where I would have the DeWalt on the opposite side of the table, inset from the Milwaukee. So basically the table would have two table saws built in, and you could cut on either side. But of course I shied away from that option. I really like the DeWalt table saw stand because of its mobility. It's easier to get things around. So I'm just making cuts here, and just from the feel of it, the DeWalt, I mean, well, the actual Festool is powerful for its size. The and it's smooth. I would say it's smooth. The Milwaukee feels smoother. As you can see there, there's some burn marks on the actual from the blade on that piece of wood that I cut. The Milwaukee actually feels a bit smoother than the DeWalt by comparison. I don't know if I would necessarily say it's as smooth as the Festool. It's very it's a subjective experience, you know, to say, you know, testing the saw's smoothness. Now, the DeWalt, I heard it said in the past that it's kind of chattery, and I would actually support that claim that the cut, but I mean, it has no problem cutting. And if I'm, you know, to be honest, it appears to be the most powerful of the three saws. It just kind of, you know, chugs through the wood, but it just doesn't feel as though it's as a smooth cutting of a saw, even though it does perfectly fine. I don't know, it could be the blade actually, because if you notice on the Milwaukee, I do have a Diablo blade on there, and I think with the DeWalt, it just has the stock blade, so it could be the actual blade that I have on there that is giving me a different result. So maybe in the future I'll change that blade out and we'll see if it's the same thing. But I did, before I bought my FlexFold table saw, when I was doing comparisons, I actually heard a YouTuber basically saying that it had a chattery type feel. So here I'm having to move my benchdogs.co.uk fence out of the way, as I was unable to advance the wood. But once I move it out of the way, I've got a decent length to complete the cut. Many of my days in the shop, unfortunately, end up kind of like this, where it took time to I had set up the shop beforehand, but I had to determine, okay, what's the most effective and efficient thing to do for today. And in order for me to assemble these stands for the miter saws, I figured I might as well just mill up all the boards and get them how I want them to be. Not cut to length, but basically cut to just squaring up the edges so that, you know, hopefully the boards go together a little bit better. I don't think, I may try to run them over the jointer and then, you know, do a little bit of planing on them, just to see if I can, you know, try to make the boards a little bit more square than they actually are, because as I've mentioned before, 2x4s tend to twist and bow quite a bit, and it makes it a lot more challenging to put projects together when you're working with wood like that. Before going down this path with the woodworking, I didn't have all the information that I needed to understand about wood movement, having wood in your shop over a period of time, and how it can, like if it's on the concrete, it can actually bring up moisture and actually cause your boards to twist and bow. And then also too, many way more experienced woodworkers, they'll have wood in their shop for years, so that it acclimates to an environment, so that it, you know, it's a lot more pleasant of a process. Most of my wood is coming straight from the big box store at this time. I plan on upgrading and going to actual hardwood dealer to get hopefully some better quality and better priced lumber. But as of right now, I have a ton of wood in the shop, and my goal is just really getting a feel for how my tools work, but at the same time trying to make my shop as functional as I can, so that I can kind of make the repeatable cuts that I need to make, and to be able to move from station to station. This process, I mean, it's a lot larger than what I thought it would be, going down this path in this woodworking journey, because there's so many areas that you touch on. I have a woodworking class book that I got from the thrift store, and it kind of goes into, you've got turning, you've got carving, you've got obviously you've got finished carpentry, you've got framing, you've got all these different elements, you've got furniture making. And for myself, I have not settled in on 100% on what I want to do. I just know that I do want to be able to build cabinets because it seems most functional at this time. If I can make some decent cabinets, I can make the garage look a lot nicer. The process, though, of getting to that point obviously is getting better with using your tools. People, will clown you because you don't know how to use your tools, and that's all right. It takes time to get better. One of the challenges I found with trying to get a garage shop together, obviously you can buy pre-built cabinetry or something like that. However, most garages have a natural slope going out the garage. So that means that, let's say you build carts and you put them on wheels, well, then there's really no way for those to be 100% level because of that slope of the garage. So if you think about that aesthetically, if you're looking up against the side of your wall and you've got cabinets there, they'll either be like tilted to one side, going down towards out the garage. I've never determined or, tested or measured to see what that degree of drop is, say from the back of the garage all the way to the garage door, how much of a measurement that drops. But regardless of that, it means that, like, if you want a bench to be perfectly level, then you have to take into consideration where you're putting it in the shop. And when you have a mobile shop, it makes it 100% harder because, infinitely harder, because you have to determine, unless you're going to use a bench in the same spot in your shop all the time, well, then how do you level it, right? Unless you put, number one, you'd have to put wheels on your cart, and then you'd also have to put leveling feet, and you'd have to adjust it for every single section of the shop that you would put it in, which is obviously less than ideal because all that has to be factored into any kind of build process. The Festool MFT gives you that ability. I think it's got that third leg that you can basically adjust to try to level out the table no matter where you put it. The UG stand also has some functionality to be able to level things out. However, admittedly, in the beginning, I didn't really understand that, like, when you're trying to build something and you put it on a surface that's not level, then basically, when you're putting sides on and stuff like that, there's a chance that they could actually be skewed to one side or the other, the side that the board or that the table is leaning in. So I have not come up with the perfect solution for that as of yet, but I'm working on it. For this garage shop, I need to be able to put my tools away. You can see right there to the right at the bottom, I have a bunch of stuff just piled up under there, and that just leads to a lack of productivity, because oftentimes the thing or the tool that I decide that I want to use is under a pile of stuff like that. So I'm doing a lot of shuffling to the left and to the right in order to find a way to get to the tool that I want to use so that I can, do a better job. Before I get out of here, as you can see, I'm using the DeWalt table saw. What I ended up discovering towards the end of this cut session is that for whatever reason, I was cutting at a 5-degree angle prior to, and I didn't check it. And so all my boards actually came out off. And so now this is when I pretty much wrapped up this session because I was pretty frustrated, because basically all the the boards that I cut down on this particular saw are now going to have to either be recut, or I'm going to have to try to joint them, or I'm going to have to do something totally different with them. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but these are part of the growing pains when you're new to this process. And It's just, you know, something that I'm gonna keep working at. And, you know, this right here is the perfect reason why I don't buy better quality lumber right now, because, you know, there's a process you have to have in order in your mind, everything that you're trying to do, so that you don't undo good work that you do or ruin it by, you know, having something like having your saw at a 5-degree angle. Anyways, guys, rambling yet again. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to check out the video, and I will see you in the next one. You guys take care.